again, everyone, in person, online. We're still very happy to be presenting today on a collaboration with UW-Madison Libraries and the Chazen Museum of Art. My name is still Scott Prater, and I'm a digital library architect for the UW Digital Collection Center with the libraries.
And I'm Jill Gams. I am the production manager for UW Digital Collection Center. I was also the grant project manager for the Mellon Foundation grant that we will be presenting on.
So in this presentation, we'll cover the project we undertook with the Chazen Museum of Art. The goal of the project was to upgrade our digital collections infrastructure to meet museum needs, as well as to improve the overall digital resource discovery, management, and preservation. So our intention is to show you how, by taking advantage of our existing architecture and using flexible, proven project management techniques, we were able to have a successful collaboration.
So I'll share a little bit about our grant project management. Something that was both a benefit and a challenge to this project was being held to the deliverables, scope, and roles laid out in the grant proposal. This was a benefit in that we had a template to work from. It was a challenge because things change. So during our project, we had staff changes. Our partner needs changed, and our work environment changed. This project was scheduled to launch in February 2020. Great timing, just a few weeks before COVID quarantines and hiring freezes. So as the world changed, our project timelines obviously needed to change as well. And by the time I onboarded with the project in June 2021, we needed a full regroup. So some of my first tasks as the project manager were to clarify those roles and responsibilities and expectations for all parties. Also to set up our communication methods, the necessary reporting cadence and format, and to schedule our project milestones and check-ins. So this slide shows us a high-level view of our project roadmap, which included 3 major areas named in the grant. And they are extending digital collections infrastructure for the Chazen Museum of Art, and providing coordinated discovery for the Chazen's collections, and developing a preservation service where the Chazen's digital collections are being deposited. To create the Chazen's online archival collection, we first had to get a sense of their content. And there was a lot of it. This graphic here represents 70 cubic feet of exhibition-related materials. The appraisal, processing, and content analysis was mostly done by our project partners over at the Chazen. Big credit to Digital Asset Coordinator Jordan Craig, who weeded through all of this. But the libraries did work with them to come up with an organized approach to examining these boxes and describing their contents. So from there, we started by identifying some representative items for their exhibition content. And this slide here shows materials from a complex maximal record. So you can see on this image, there are papers, there are posters, there are color slides, cassette tapes, VHS tapes, you name it. This is the maximal record. So it's gonna show everything you would possibly work with for the exhibition record. We also identified then what a minimal item would look like. So what is required of everything? Maybe just a title, creator, and date. And then we identified what a normal or average record would look like. Once we had identified these representative data sets, we worked with our Chazen partners to learn more about their mental models for organizing their exhibition content. And to understand how these different audiences might make use of the content, we then conducted a hybrid card sort using Optimal Workshop. This slide shows a popularity matrix of the participants' choices, where the darkest values are those with the most votes. The card sort helped us to better understand their research goals, but it also helped us to propose display categories and design solutions.
Through thoughtful content analysis and talking over our user needs with our stakeholders, we decided that the Chazen's exhibition records merited a special built user experience. So this slide shows a diagram of the new object model the libraries developed from the Chazen stakeholder feedback. The exhibition is the organizing principle and the parent record, sort of the umbrella record, for all the exhibition-related content. The exhibition title is searchable and may link to other records in separate collections, such as the exhibition catalogs in the Chazen Museum Publications collection. Within the exhibition record, content is grouped and displayed within one of these 5 categories. We have the gallery experience, the promotional materials, events, preparation and administration, and finally, educational resources. The card sort exercise really helped us to identify these categories. And notably, this object model and display was also designed to be extensible to a wide variety of galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, what we're going to be calling GLAMs.
So here you can see the user interface for exhibition records. This is the exhibition Breaking the Bindings, American Book Art Now. It was curated by former UW faculty Walter Hamady in 1983. Below our standard record overview and available actions are the newly modeled exhibition categories. As you scroll down the page, you can see some of the other categories and the items included within them here. So the preparation and administration block, for example, will show users content related to the curatorial process. And this could include proposals or an exhibition checklist, floor plan drafts. Here, I've zoomed in on a page of a handwritten exhibition checklist for Breaking the Bindings. From it, users can discover the titles, they can discover the creators, the media, for all pieces displayed in the exhibition. During the design process, this is when we learned from our Chazen stakeholders that it would be really important to highlight the exhibition checklist in the user interface. It's important because it has such high research value for museum curators and art historians. And so we're very excited to be providing digital access to these resources.
But our collaboration was not just this one-time affair for the duration of the grant. It's for the long haul. We also developed a workflow for including the Chazen's ever-growing permanent collection of images and data into our digital collections. Every night, a set of scripts extracts new and updated resources from their internal database and loads them into our repository. Chazen, the libraries, Do It, and UW Marketing work together to create an automated feed that can be easily adapted for future GLAM partnerships. We are also committed to preserving the Chazen's digital resources for the future. And now we're going to be talking about the preservation piece of the grant. This diagram illustrates a workflow for digital assets from the moment of creation through management to access. The UW Digital Collection Centers manages the Chazen's and the library's digital content in the UW-DC repository. Content in the repository is discoverable and accessible to the public through the UW-DC search interface. Content in the repository that is tagged for preservation will be automatically copied to the preservation system. Note that the preservation service does not provide public access. Its goal is to sustainably preserve digital content for decades or longer, indefinitely, really, protecting it as best we can from whatever the future may bring.
So when we started the grant, much of the initial design work for the preservation service was already underway. But as we onboarded more grant staff, we needed a better way to manage our work. We used Redmine as our project management tool, and we assigned target versions of minimal viable product, phase 2, or freezer to all tasks. We used the Agile module in Redmine, and this allowed us to organize our tasks into sprints and easily pull tickets from the backlog through our workflow. And structuring our work this way helped us to meet our quarterly goals and stay on track for grant deliverables.
Another principle for our development was gathering user stories based on the user's roles. Our preservation infrastructure development team met early on to draft user stories based on the requirements of different kinds of users who might have a need for a preservation service. This slide shows a selection of user stories drafted around organizations and vaults. Each story was assigned story points and target version to help us set development priorities. The user stories drove development of the initial user interface for the preservation service. This slide shows an example of what a digital object looks like in our preservation repository.
Once we had the MVP, we then did usability testing with our external partners. And these partners were content managers and archivists. We invited people from the Chazen Museum of Art, Law Library, the Wisconsin Historical Society, UW Archives, and the Center for Film and Theater Research to participate in usability testing. While usability testing validated the user interface, it also highlighted a few minor pain points. And this screenshot is of a usability task where our participants were asked to add objects to their vault. While all participants ultimately succeeded, 2 out of the 6 hesitated, commenting that the copy in the review was a little confusing. So this usability testing feedback then informed a design sprint where we changed the copy to make the action more clear and adjusted the font hierarchy for greater prominence.
Throughout the grant, we always kept in mind our broader goal to develop a model of collaboration using our existing tools and processes that we could bring to future GLAM partnerships. So in these last slides, we'll summarize the principles that we'll bring to our next partnership.
So I'll recap some of the project management strategies for success. First, wherever possible, we recommend using a template. In our project, we used and extended existing procedures for onboarding new partners. Second, when designing new features or products, remember to narrate. We created focus groups to elicit user stories to define requirements and scope. Third, the design process should be agile. Remember to iterate. We showed our progress early through mock-ups and often through design sprints. We also challenged our assumptions by conducting regular acceptance testing and broader usability testing of our MVP. And finally, don't forget to communicate. From the beginning, we established channels of communication with our stakeholders. We reported regularly, and we continuously called out our milestones, our successes, and our obstacles.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how our technical infrastructure helped us succeed. And basically that can be summed up in 2 words, couple loosely. So each functional component should stand alone with an API for inputs and outputs. And then you can overlay your workflows on top of your functional components. Different workflows can use the same set of components. And finally, that enables you to offer your partners a menu of services to choose from. And the payoff for all this is that you can update your infrastructure pieces in a targeted and isolated manner, and that makes it easier to maintain and improves sustainability overall.
So remember those 70 cubic feet. Using our strategies for success, we were able to reduce 70 cubic feet of exhibition content to just 17 cubic feet for processing and inclusion in digital collections. And from those 17 cubic feet, the Chazen selected content for digitization and inclusion in UW digital collections. To date, 95% of the analog content that was suitable for public access has been digitized. By the end of June, we will have published 82% of the Chazen's exhibition records, showcasing over 40 years of exhibition history. And we have published over 60% of their digitized permanent collection. And as we continue to add images, the Chazen Permanent Art Collection will become one of the largest collections we host in UW-DC.
And in the past 2 months, we've deposited over 650,000 digital collection objects into our preservation service. This is 20% of our entire collections. So that's it. Thank you for attending our presentation. And you can use this QR code or type in the link below it to visit and browse our collections. And before I close, I just want to point out that Becky, who is sitting here right here, was one of the prime developers and managers of this project, and it would not have been possible without her. Thank you, Becky. Now we have some time for questions.
I'm curious about the card sort. When you were doing that, about how many people did you involve in that process, and how did you go about finding them?
Yes, this is a great question. So the card sort we did do primarily with the Chazen staff, and I think they all participated in it. We did it as hybrid, so we had some controlled categories and we knew what our content was. Like, we knew we had exhibition checklists and things like this. So we wanted to understand where they might plug them in. And then we also had flexible, where they could add in their own non-standardized categories. And it went through a couple of different iterations before we got the categories. This was all still contextualized within broader conversations around library discovery too. And our goal of this project was to develop a model for collaboration with GLAMs and to develop infrastructure that could be broadly applied and extensible to them. So we couldn't be like hyper specific to art museums in the terminology we chose, and that was part of the iterative process too of naming. Yeah.
Hi, I was wondering what sort of cultural resource management software you used. The cultural resource management software for uploading the digitized content.
Oh, okay. So I know that the Chazen has their own vendor-provided content management system, gallery.
Embark.
Embark, right,
Yes,
gallery
and
system.
that was part of what you were talking about. What do you want to
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, Embark has under the hood a database, a SQL database, and an API for querying it. And so basically, we just wrote some scripts that run. Our own content management system is homegrown, but it's based on the Fedora repository, open source Fedora repository system.
All right, Jill and Scott, this is a wonderful story of success. But is there anything you would have changed looking back on it and reflecting back on it?
Well, not having a global pandemic would have been helpful. But knowing that that happened and knowing that anything can happen, planning for change as part of your process. And Scott and I were talking about this some too. One other thing we talked about, so planning for change, so planning to know that you may be onboarding people throughout the process at different stages. Particularly in grant-funded work, you're liable to have turnover, people finding permanent positions that they want to move into. And so having those templates to follow, documenting well along the way is going to help you transition. But we were also talking about how this can be a benefit to your work as well, because you're getting fresh perspectives throughout the process and you are challenging your assumptions. If it looks strange to someone new coming in, then maybe there's something that needs to be explained better or documented better. And then the other thing that I would probably just remind anyone starting any grant project is to make sure you do a thorough listing of who your stakeholders are. Don't leave anyone out, and get that buy-in right from the beginning, because it will clarify your goals a lot more. And those were some of the challenges I think I faced doing project management from the beginning.
Yeah, so like a lot of grant projects, we wrote this grant under a deadline. We submitted it quickly. We did bring in some people, the Chazen obviously, but when Jill came in fresh, there were a lot of things in the grant that we had just sort of waved our hands at. And Jill had the honor and privilege of taking those vague sections of the grant and turning them into something concrete.
It was a team effort.
Hi. Since you were creating new systems that everybody had to use and they only work when everybody uses them correctly and if everybody buys in, how did you approach getting buy-in from everybody who needed to use this? And did you run into challenges and you know, what kinds of techniques did you use for change management around that buy-in for staff or anybody else?
Yeah, so in this case, it was really kind of a coalition of the willing and the eager that the Chazen really wanted to collaborate with us and to get their collections and especially the exhibition records, which I think is one of the first and one of the largest now in the country in terms of online collections, integrated with the broader library, digital resources and resources in general. And since most of our system is homegrown, our processes and workflows are homegrown, one of the benefits, what to them was actually one of the nice things is that the libraries came and said, we have the system set up, we know how to do this, we can just take care of it for you. And we'll consult with you more about the things that are about content, presentation, audience, but the technical part, we've got that down. And that was actually one of the reasons why they wanted to participate in the grant, because their primary business is being a museum, not being a software development shop or a systems IT shop. And we did have those resources. So I'd say in this particular case, the buy-in came pre-baked into the grant.
Yeah, and that structure was also in place with the grant because we had our PIs were Dean of the Libraries and Director of the Chazen Museum of Art. And then our stakeholder team, we did meet fairly regularly at the beginning. We did quarterly reporting so people were knowing what was happening always internal. And then we had a few stakeholder meetings with it. And then as Scott was saying, like another thing that was baked into the grant was that it was a goal to marry the expertise of their organization with our organization. So the technical part was taken care of. And then when it came to the design decisions, we really, tried to think about it in terms of MVP, nice to have, future phases too, which also helped us to prioritize work and have those conversations about expectations.
Yeah, and I think that is probably the biggest piece is the conversation about expectations because, the Chazen, other organizations, ask them what they want and they'll give you a laundry list a mile long. And so early on, you show them this is what we do, this is how we do it, this is what's possible, will this work for you? And if not, what sorts of things would you like to see, which are required, which would be, we should have it, which would be nice to have. And we actually did approach it that way. What are required, what, should we have, and then what would be nice to have and what don't you really matter on. And we did approach that very early on and very clearly with the language that the technology and systems we have are constrained. We can't just build anything for anybody. And that was good, setting the expectations early on, as Jill said.
This is a really cool project, and it sounds like there was a ton of buy-in from the biggest people that could have been involved. What were some of the motivations? Like, what were the outcomes that you all were looking for? Like, what was pushing you all to want to be one of the first groups to do this? What are some of the things that the university would get out of this that could help, set priorities, goals, and keep you motivated?
Well, two big parts of it tied directly to the strategic directions at the libraries. So one of them, very broadly written, broaden and deepen access to research resources. That's what we do, we're libraries, but also developing preservation infrastructure. And that was probably the biggest thing driving it, would you say?
Yeah. I think we approached them with the grant because we had this big preservation idea system that we had been developing for years, but we didn't have a lot of money or resources to develop it. And it was a big project. And we kind of felt like this is where libraries need to go in the 21st century. And, we weren't the only ones. All libraries are kind of moving in this area. We wanted to get ahead of it, and we saw the grant as an opportunity. And I'm not sure what the conversations were at the high level, but I know that Chazen had been talking for years that they had all their digitized images and materials on a hard drive under somebody's desk in the basement. And they were worried about that with reason. So when they heard preservation system, they raised their hand and said, we're there.
And I think the exhibition materials was also a really big part for them because that had as much vulnerability as their digital assets too. And I mean, some of their exhibition materials now are born digital, but being able to cull through all of that, and that was the work of Jordan Craig, our digital asset coordinator over there, and then having an organized system. And speaking of nice to have, versus what we provided, which I think is pretty nice. But the only models for comparison were like MoMA and like New York Public Library. I think those were the ones that we were looking at. So this really was a big feat, and it was a big undertaking, and I think a delivery that they were really happy with.
I am so sorry. I know there's more questions in the audience, but we're going to have to wrap it up so that we can get the next presentation set up. Scott and Jill, if you have a few minutes, maybe you can stick around and answer a few more questions from folks. Thank you so much. Thanks to Jill. Thanks to Scott for presenting. And thank you to all of you for being here. And stick around. We've got lots of other great sessions coming up.